Hi everyone, welcome back to our ongoing review of Rings of Power Season 2. Thank you for joining us as always. We had another episode today that kind of went all around Middle Earth, plus we finally went back to Numor. The name of the episode was Halls of Stone, and it was definitely another, for me, frustrating episode in the sense that a lot of things that are supposed to be in the lore, they're supposed to be kind of like the law of Tolkien, are again broken and ignored. The biggest offender here are probably the rings themselves. The rings are just shown to have weird powers that shouldn't apply to the beings that that are using them. It's basically like all the rings have the power of the One Ring, or some portion of the power of the One Ring, and it really doesn't make sense. But I guess let's get down to the episode itself and kind of what happened, and we'll break it down further from there. We start off this week's episode in Khazad-dûm with the Dwarves. We see that Duran the Third has received his ring, and he comes down deep into the mines where Duran the Fourth is, and apparently his ring is giving him powers to detect precious metals, I assume especially mithril, deep within the mountain. He's like, knocking on the stone as he's going around saying, here is, where to dig. And then he takes like a pickaxe and just goes all like He-Man on it and basically tears a hole in the side of the mountain. I'm not sure that the rings are supposed to give you superhuman strength, where you can just go down the side of a mountain without any problem. But that's getting back to what I'm talking about with them not following the lore as far as the rings go. It's possible, of course, to say that the one ring would give you super powerful supernatural strength. Sure. You can definitely see that being the case with the One Ring itself. But for the Dwarven rings, their rings were pretty defined. It didn't affect them as much as other rings affected other beings because of their sturdier disposition, their sturdier composition. The rings did make the elves greedier, less for gold and other metals and whatnot. For sure that they increased their greed. But as far as giving them superhuman abilities, or super dwarven abilities, I guess, it didn't make them super strong. It didn't make them some kind of super detector of the ores they were looking for. So to me, that didn't make a whole lot of sense as far as the lore goes. That hey, this ring is giving him all these additional powers. I think all they had to show there was him getting greedy, that hey, I've got this ring, the effect it's having on me is I want more, and more. One particular problem I see specifically with Duran the Third's ring is that it seems to make him a little bit more human-like, in the sense that you can see the ring like corrupting him as if it were the One Ring itself, or even one of the 9 rings of the men. And that just, it wouldn't have, the ring wouldn't have that effect on a dwarf, for the aforementioned reasons. They were of sturdier stock, and they weren't corruptible in the same vein that men are. One cool thing that we did get to see vis-a-vis the dwarves this episode was, I guess, the creation and consecration of the doors of Duran, which, if you remember from the films, we get to see as the Fellowship is entering Moria. One problem with the doors of Duran scene that I had in particular, though, was it seemed like the door itself was carved, whereas it should have been inlaid with Ithilden by Celebrimbor. You shouldn't have been able to see all those markings on the door without moonlight. If you remember from the films, when Gandalf and the Fellowship approach the door, the markings light up with the help of moonlight. Otherwise, you can't see the door there. So shouldn't the markings have been invisible since there was no moonlight there in that moment? Just, I know why they had to show it, because hey, we have to show that, you know, this is the doors of Duran, and you remember all the carvings and markings on it and whatnot. But I don't know why they didn't just take it outside the door and do the scene under the moonlight, so, you know, we could see it that way. But that's just, you know, a small thing in a sea of a lot of problems. So it was cool to see its creation here for sure. It would have been done a lot earlier, probably, than what they're showing here as far as timeline goes. It would have been earlier in the Second Age, its creation. But hey, it's good enough that, you know, I guess we're seeing it, and it's not a door into Mordor or something like that. Because with these showrunners, you never know what changes they'll make. So one particularly stupid scene that we get this week, which I didn't really like, was the one of the tuning crystal, which Disa and Duran the Fourth buy, I guess, for their daughter's upcoming birthday. Just how they had that scene, how they kind of just treated Disa in that scene, I didn't really care for. It was just like Keystone Cops kind of like hijinks. Like, oh, look at it. Oops, the stone's rolling all over the place. Oops, it goes into some cavern, you know, by the lake, and, you know, she needs to sing to the rock in order to find it. And that apparently, I guess, wakes up the Balrog, calls the attention of the Balrog, who responds. And we see the crystal shatter, and, you know, Disa run off to warn the rest of the dwarves. But it just felt so silly, and that's what this show does. Even the characters it does well or does justice by, it has moments of weakness that just aren't necessary. Just that entire, you know, little 1 minute, you know, of hijinks just took you out of the scene, and it just felt inappropriate for the character in that moment. So it's just it's completely unforced error in my opinion. As far as the elves go in this episode, we see the same inconsistencies, especially with the rings. I particularly did not like that scene where the young elf maiden who's smitten with Sauron, I forget her name, Meridian or something like that. Particularly, I don't care, to be honest. Whatever her name is, she's pointless. But they show her, I guess, working on one of the rings of the men, and she puts on the ring, disappears, stuff starts flying around. And my question is, why does wearing one of the 9 rings of men make an elf disappear? And why does it have such a profound effect on her, where she sees, you know, the image or, you know, the shadow of Sauron and feels all that? You know, this goes back to the problem I was talking about at the beginning of the review. There's no consistency as far as the lore goes, and on the rings. The rings should not behave like they are. Elves should not be influenced by the rings of the men like they are. It's just silliness to foreshadow that, hey, this is Sauron and evil is coming, and it's. I know the show runners and the creators think that they're being very smart by tying everything together, that, oh, our audience will get it. But what you are doing in reality is you're weakening the overall world and structure. That is not how Tolkien wrote the rings. That's not how any of this works. If the rings affect every race the same, then you've erased a huge amount of what Tolkien was doing with the rings and their purpose. The One Ring was not every ring. The One Ring was unique in itself. It was Sauron's ring, and it had powers unique to itself. And of course, you know, those powers came from Sauron directly. But the One Ring's powers were self-contained. The Dwarven rings did not have the One Ring's power. The human rings did not have the One Ring's power. It's very silly to show it like that. And again, you know, you can say that, yeah, but they're just making the show. They're trying to make it the show for everybody and try to connect everything. I can understand that. But the problem is, you're changing fundamentally what the story is about and how it goes about telling it. You can't have every ring have something to do with the One Ring itself. No matter how lazy the audience is about learning new lore or wanting to learn new lore, you can't fundamentally change the story. Celebrimbor continues to be an absolutely feckless character. I want you to remember who Celebrimbor is. He's the grandson of Feanor, who is pretty much like the greatest elven craftsman, ever. Forget elven. He's the greatest craftsman besides Aule on all of Arda itself. And his grandson, from the first season, you remember, he doesn't even know what an alloy is. Oh, you can mix two metals together? What a shock. I'm pretty sure you learned that, in high school chemistry at worst, if not earlier in your life. But the grandson of, the greatest creator in all of Arda doesn't know what an alloy is or how it would work. I've hated how they showed him. I don't like how the actor has portrayed him. I never once feel like I'm watching Celebrimbor. If you guys have played some of the Lord of the Rings video games, I think Shadow of War, I really enjoy that game. The lore is completely terrible as far as, sticking to what Tolkien wrote and what it's supposed to be. They took the lore and went somewhere else. But I still enjoyed playing the game, and as long as I told myself, well, this is just like make-believe lore for the most part, I was fine, and at least it showed like Celebrimbor in somewhat like more realistic way. Like the video games version of Celebrimbor is more realistic than what they're showing. Celebrimbor was at least a badass in the video game, and it just he's so feckless here. I mean, yeah, he gets, spoiler alert, he gets duped by Sauron in the long run, and all those bad things happen to him, sure. But he wasn't completely feckless like this. He wasn't just some pansy loser like they're trying to show him to be. And that's really disappointing. I wanted to see, something of Feanor in Celebrimbor. The character deserves that. And to have this ridiculousness is just so disheartening. Celebrimbor might be the most disappointing character on this entire show, and that's saying a lot, because one character after another is disappointing in this. Well, I'll say second most, because Galadriel is definitely the most disappointing character by far. So everyone is playing for second at this point behind her. But yeah, the guy is the grandson of Feanor, and you're showing him like this. It's dejecting. It's bad universe building. We should want to get to know Celebrimbor more. We should want to see his works. I know these guys don't have the rights to the First Age, Silmarillion, and whatnot, but you could at least somewhat call back to maybe Feanor or some of his works. You could do so much better than this, and you could set up Celebrimbor in such a better manner than they have, and it's so disappointing to see this. And in this episode, we finish off the Elves' arc by them implying that Adar and his orcs will have an alliance with the Elves against Sauron. So I guess we're going to have the first alliance of Elves and orcs now. Is that what this show is going to do? Please, to God, I hope that's not what we get. Elves and orcs never came together to fight anybody together. Orcs did not come together with the other races to fight together. The orcs were shunned and considered absolutely evil by other races. They would never have teamed up with orcs, and orcs likewise disdained the other races, the higher races, and to show them potentially teaming up together would be an absolute disgrace to all of Tolkien's work. But I get the feeling that's where we're going, where Adar, tells Galadriel at the end that, hey, we can be partners, we can be allies. So please let's not go down this stupid route, please. And to finish things off, we come to the Numor Arc, which again makes no sense. Numenor is so terribly done in the show altogether. But basically, we see Ar-Pharazôn having been crowned now, having usurped the throne, and him turning into a dictator, an authoritarian, and he's cracking down on everyone. Elendil gets his captaincy stripped from him. We see the rights of many of the Numenorians are taken away, and specifically they're coming after the ones that are faithful to the Elves. Above all, the casting of the Numenorians is so bad, just like pretty much all the other characters of this show. Remember from the lore, the Numenorians were like the high men. They were the great men. They were like 8 feet tall or whatever. They were super advanced. They built these great halls, these great towers. Even if you don't know much about Numenor, you can remember some of the structures that they built in Middle Earth from either the books or the movies. Of course, they built cities like Minas Tirith, Minas Ithil, which later became Minas Morgul. They created Amansul. There was a great tower there. Just the architecture and the things that they created were just so amazing. The Argonath, another one, just a great visual example. The Argonath were for that level of technology that they had in the Third Age, was just mind-blowing how any race could create the Argonath. And here we don't get a sense of that grandness in any way, whether how they look, how they behave, or even them actually creating anything. We don't see them really create anything. And it's such a shame that they've reduced Numenorians to just kind of like bros. They're average dudes, and there's not much else to them. The only actor character that feels like they're well cast is Elendil. Like Elendil, yeah, I can see that being Aragorn's forefather. You can definitely see that, and of course that's what they were going for. So I guess for once, good job, undoing the bare minimum. Finding a competent, actor who looks like, and feels like the role they're supposed to espouse. But otherwise, yeah, none of the rest of the Numenorians feel like you're ever dealing with Numenorians, and that shouldn't be the case. Anyway, in the episode, we see the Numenorians, specifically the elf friendly ones, dealt a heavy blow in this episode. Valandil, Isildur's friend, is killed by Pharazôn's son. I think it's Pharazôn's son, right? I really don't care, but it's another silly scene. Why would you, if you're Valandil, Elendil, anyone, why would you begin to fight Pharazôn's men? Because if you fight them, you're automatically dead, pretty much. He's going to kill you. You know that. So either you fight them or you don't. If you're going to fight them, you have to fight them to the death, and then you pretty much have to skedaddle from Numenor. What they showed was, hey, let's surrender, and hopefully the king will have mercy on us or whatever. So Valandil, of course, drops his sword as he's about to kill that dude, and he conveniently drops it right beside him so that he can get stabbed in the back. More piss poor writing, more amateur writing. But yeah, it makes absolutely no sense to surrender at that point because you're dead either way. So you might as well see it through. You might as well kill as many people as you can or get killed yourself. But surrendering made absolutely no sense. But they wanted to show Valandil having that tragic death, that Greek tragedy of him getting stabbed in the back. Just more poor writing that doesn't make sense when you really think about it. It doesn't have a place there, and that's par for the course, of course. But what we'll see now is Elendil being captured, and somehow he'll escape, and I assume he'll be off to Middle Earth for his adventures there. But just everything about the Numenorians is a disappointment. You could do a show just about the Numenorians and no other race and have it be fantastic. They're that interesting of a race. They have such interesting characters. If the Rings of Power guys had just decided to do, hey, let's do a Numenor show, they would have been probably way better off rather than trying to squeeze all these other things in. But unfortunately, they don't have that foresight, obviously. Also, I'm tired of the far green country under a swift sunrise line being used. It was just a line used by Gandalf, I believe, to Pip in the book. I forget, or was it Frodo? I don't remember. It's a little bit jumbled right now. But point is, it's one small line, and this is the problem. They try to pull things from the book to make themselves look how smart we are. We're using the lore. We're using what's in the books, but it's out of place. There's no reason why that line is an overarching theme of all Arda. Why is someone in Numenor saying that, right? If Gandalf says it, okay, it makes sense, but why are some dudes in Numenor saying it? And it gets back to the shitty world building that this show does. So, unfortunately, the show is still bad. The writing is still bad. The acting is still bad. There's really not much good about this show, period. But, hey, we'll keep at it. Let's end on a positive note today. One of our viewers last week, Tar Elenion, great name, gave us some insight into the dwarves and farming. Remember, we've been having that question for a few weeks now. And he pulled out a quote, and let me share that with you. The dwarves had an agriculture which in early times they practiced when isolated and unable to buy grain, etc., by barter. They had invented a plow of some sort, which they dragged as well as steered themselves. They were tough and strong, but they did not delight in such labor of necessity. And that is from a 1968 note on Elvish economy published in the Nature of Middle-earth. So thank you to Tar Elenion for bringing this snippet to light, this note to light. So I think that gives us a better idea of whether dwarves farm or not. Kind of closes the case. They have farmed in the past, and they will do it if necessary, but God, do they hate it. So that gives us, I think, a good final answer. Dwarves will only farm when absolutely necessary. And as far as how it's been showed in the show, they're showing dwarves farming at the peak of Khazad-dûm when they would have been ridiculously rich and had all the wealth. So they would have never have needed to farm. So that's definitely inaccurate as it's depicted in the show. They would have just traded for food. But in times of dire need, dwarves can farm. On that happy note, we will end this week's review. I hope you enjoyed it. We got 3 more episodes, I think, this season. I'm not expecting things to get better, but hey, we'll stay here. We'll hopefully help people understand the lore a little bit better, and we'll provide commentary. Thank you for watching as always. Until next week. Please honor us by hitting that subscribe button if you like this video.